So Rickson Gracie began his fight career April 25th, 1980, where he faced against Ray Zulu, who was a well-known street fighter inside Brazil. The fight lasted 11 minutes and 55 seconds, and Rickson Gracie won the fight via rear naked chokehold. He then fought Ray Zulu in a highly anticipated rematch January 1st, 1984, where he once again defeated him via submission, and the same submission, rear naked chokehold. This fight was a lot more exciting too, as Rickson was lifted up by Ray in the air, thrown about for a bit, and actually fell out of the ring at one point, and they had to help Rickson back inside. Rickson took a 10-year layoff from fighting professionally inside of matches, but he did continue to do submission grappling at this time, not fighting until BrazillianJiu-Jitsu Japan 1994. Rickson Gracie was originally the favorite of the family, and he was expected to fight in the UFC. However, his younger brother Royce would fight in the UFC instead. Inside Japan, Rickson fought in an 8-man tournament where he defeated all 3 men via submission, first being Yoshinori Nishi, who he defeated via rear naked chokehold, Dave Leckie, who tapped out to punches, and Bud Smith, who also tapped out to punches. Rickson fought again the following year, April 20th, 1995, in another 8-man tournament, the 1995 Vale Tudo in Japan, where he faced off against Yoshihisa Yamamoto, who he defeated via rear naked chokehold. He then faced against Koichiki Kimura, who he defeated via rear naked chokehold, and Yuki Nakai, who he also defeated via rear naked chokehold. Facing Yuki Nakai, Rickson actually showed mercy in this fight. I want to point that out, as Yuki Nakai's eye had been severely damaged in his previous fight the same night, and Rickson had not tried throwing a single punch against Yuki and defeated him via submission. Rickson then fought again in Pride 1, October 11th, 1997, where he faced off against Nobuhiko Takada, who was one of the #1 ranked fighters in Japan at the time. The fight was highly anticipated, but Rickson Gracie was able to defeat him via armbar 4 minutes and 47 seconds into the very first round. Exactly 1 year later, October 11th, 1998, he fought a highly anticipated rematch against Takada in front of 30,000 fans inside of Japan. Takada added a lot more pressure in this fight, as he was clearly better prepared for Rickson's jiu-jitsu and did not want to be taken down and try to keep the fight standing. He landed many body shots to Rickson, most of which did not hurt him, until he finally landed a knee, which clearly had Rickson in pain. However, Rickson was able to use his superior strength, maintain position, before eventually taking Takada to the ground, where he defeated him once again via armbar. Rickson then took a 2-year layoff from the sport, returning May 26, 2000, where he faced off against Masakatsu Funaki, a very well-rounded fighter and probably the most experienced fighter Rickson had faced to this day. Having defeated the likes of Ken Shamrock and Bas Rutten in the past, Funaki was clearly a very good challenge for Rickson. However, after 12 minutes and 49 seconds of a grueling fight that went back and forth, where Rickson actually received a cut, the only fight where he received a cut to his face, he eventually defeated Funaki via rear naked chokehold. Funaki, however, the warrior he is, did indeed refuse to tap in this fight and was choked unconscious via Rickson. So with the record of 11-0 so far, and when a few years later, when other fighters like Fedor Emelianenko and Matt Hughes begin to rise up in the rankings, people expect to see Rickson return to fight. However, sadly, this will be Rickson Gracie's last fight. So with 11 fights, 11 wins, and 11 fights that he won victory in by submission, how good was Rickson Gracie? The biggest question that people often ask when they bring up Rickson is, how good would Rickson fought inside the UFC? Now, just based upon his style and the way he fought, I think Rickson actually would have done quite well in the UFC early on. First of all, he would have trained for the UFC and trained to fight inside of a cage. Rickson, unlike a lot of other purists at the time, was one of the fighters who would train, first of all, with gloves on, which I think made a huge difference, especially since he was a submission fighter. And Rickson brought a serious X factor. Even though he was more so of a purist jiu-jitsu fighter and didn't do a whole lot of striking, he did indeed learn to defend against strikes very well. And the big X factor that I feel Rickson Gracie had was his strength. Rickson was extremely strong in comparison to a lot of other people who are purists. Even his own family, Henzo, Helson, and Royce, Rickson was much stronger than all of them. And that clearly showed in the way that he fought, the way he was able to take his opponents down. I haven't seen Royce or any of the other fighters land double legs the way he did. And he reminds me of another fighter, Khabib Nurmagomedov, who today is extremely dominant. And even though he does indeed add striking to his fighting, he still mostly uses wrestling and uses it very effectively. So I do believe that Rickson, had he faced Fedor Emelianenko in his prime, could have stood a very good chance at defeating him. However, that would be almost impossible to make happen. I think a lot of people forget when they bring up Rickson never fought Fedor, so he can't be considered a good fighter, is that Rickson is 17 years older than Fedor. So it would be just about impossible to get them both to fight each other at their prime. If Prime is 30 years old, when Rickson was 30, Fedor was 13 years old. And when Fedor was 30, Rickson was 47. So it really wasn't going to happen. It's very unlikely they would be able to fight each other at their prime. However, in my opinion, I do think Rickson Gracie is, I would say, number one for submission fighters inside of combat sports. Because even though he only had 11 professional fights, he did have a whole lot of submission fights, submission grappling, and sambo tournaments, all of which he won. He only has one loss, which was controversial, inside of his entire fight career, including the submission fights outside of it. So as far as a purist goes, Rickson was the best.